Jaecheondaeseong. Before the world knew him as Jin Mori, there was Jaecheondaeseong, Sun Wukong, a name feared by gods, monsters, and kings alike. His story began when the heavenly realm ruled above all things. After the gods descended to earth and killed Gaia, protector of humanity, a strange stone was left behind. From that stone, Wukong was born, created from the ashes of divine destruction. He was discovered by the god Suputi, who trained him for 17 years. Wukong mastered supernatural arts, sharpened his instincts, and grew stronger at a terrifying pace. But as his power rose, so did his pride. He refused to bow to heaven or accept anyone above him. In time, he became Jaecheondaeseong, the great sage equal to heaven. He rose as leader of the monster realm, wielding the legendary staff Yewi and wearing the mighty Yongpyo. To his people, he was a king. To heaven, he was a nightmare. His pride ignited the first heavenly war. Wukong stormed the heavenly realm, defeating gods with monstrous strength and impossible speed. But his greatest enemy was never heaven. It was himself. He loved battle more than responsibility, and his recklessness cost allies their lives. In the end, the rebellion failed, and Wukong was captured. Rather than execute him, Buddha offered redemption through the journey to the west. Traveling beside Xuanzang and the pilgrims slowly changed him. For the first time, Wukong learned trust, loyalty, and that strength meant nothing without others. But peace never lasted. Betrayed and consumed by grief, Wukong lashed out once more, only to be stopped by the Jade Emperor. After all the war, loss, and ruin, fate gave him one final mercy. He was found on Earth by Jin Taejin, who saw not a monster, but someone who could still become better. Taejin gave him family, martial arts, and a new name: Jin Mori.
Jin Mori. 17 years after being taken in by Jin Taejin, the feared Monkey King had grown into a human teenager, living under a new name, Jin Mori. Raised by his grandfather, Mori learned renewal Taekwondo, a martial art built on speed, explosive kicks, and precision. Even as a child, he was different. His reflexes were unnatural, his body incredibly durable, and he learned techniques faster than anyone around him. Even without knowing the truth, he fought like someone born for battle. But what made Jin Mori special was not just talent, it was his spirit. He laughed in dangerous fights, chased stronger opponents for fun, and treated combat like a game, yet stayed fiercely loyal to those he loved. Jin Taejin did not raise him as a monster or king. He raised him as family. Through that, Mori learned friendship, trust, and sacrifice. Everything changed when Judge R invited him into the God of Highschool tournament. Mori entered and instantly stood out as a monster among prodigies. While others relied on weapons or borrowed powers, Mori overwhelmed them with pure martial arts skill. His kicks hit like explosions, and his instincts adapted mid-fight faster than most could think. During the tournament, Mori met Han Dewi and Yu Mira. Rivals became trusted allies, and for the first time, Mori learned to stand beside equals rather than above them. But the tournament was never just a tournament. Behind it were secret organizations, divine powers, and a coming war between humanity and the gods. When Jin Taejin was dragged into that conflict, Mori gained a reason to fight beyond enjoyment. He fought to protect the man who gave him a second life. As the war grew, Mori's memories returned. He learned he was Jaecheondaeseong, the Monkey King. Along with that truth came the return of Yewi, Gunduun, ancient armor, and the strength of a god. But now that power was fused with martial discipline. He had become a complete warrior. Then came Ragnarok. The gods descended upon Earth and pushed humanity to extinction. Mori returned stronger than ever, combining divine power, perfected martial arts, and centuries of battle instinct. He wielded Yewi like a force of nature and struck down gods themselves. Most terrifying of all, Mori used Chebongchim, or limiter removal, a technique that multiplied his strength and speed to insane levels while destroying his body from within. Even so, he kept pushing past every limit to save the world. This was Jin Mori at his peak, the playful teenager, martial arts genius, and Monkey King united into one warrior. By the end of Ragnarok, Mori had risen to the level of a supreme god. But victory brought no peace. Broken from battle, he was betrayed by Park Mubong, lost much of his power,
was forced into hiding, and worst of all, he lost Jin Tae-jin.
Mori Dan is one of the most meaningful chapters of Mori's journey, because for the first time, he no longer looked like a legend. Gone was the overwhelming aura of Jin Mori. Gone was the fearsome presence of the Monkey King. Instead, the world saw a smaller boy with blue hair, a calm expression, and an ordinary frame. Someone easy to ignore and easy to underestimate. But beneath that modest appearance remained the instincts, battle experience, and iron will of a warrior who had fought gods and survived the end of the world. After Ragnarok, repeated use of Jebong Chim and the betrayal of Pak Mubong left Mori shattered. Much of his power was sealed, his body regressed into a younger form, and the hero known as Jin Mori vanished. In his place emerged Mori Dan. For the first time in ages, Mori was not a god, king, or savior. He lived quietly with Danahan, worked part-time jobs, and protected family through effort instead of divine power. This humble life taught him maturity, patience, and responsibility. But Mori could no longer rely on overwhelming strength. So he did something harder. He started over. With help from Handewi, he rebuilt himself from the basics. Every kick became sharper, every movement cleaner. He perfected renewal taekwondo, refined staff combat, and mastered efficiency. Mori Dan was no longer dangerous because of raw power. He was dangerous because of skill. Mubong still stood above nearly everyone, and Mori repeatedly fell short against him. Yet this is where Mori Dan proved who he truly was. The younger Mori loved battle. The old Wukong loved victory. Mori Dan learned perseverance. He could lose, break, rise again, and keep moving forward. That is what makes Mori Dan special. He proved power was never the source of Mori's greatness. Strip away the godhood, legendary weapons, and overwhelming strength, and he still became stronger, smarter, and unbreakable. As the world reached its darkest hour, Mori Dan stood on the edge of one final miracle.
God of Prophecy Mori. When all hope was lost, the God of Highschool stood at the edge of extinction. Park Mubong had risen beyond humanity, stolen the authority of the supreme god, and crushed every hero who opposed him. Armies had fallen. The world was broken. Even Mori Dan, after years of rebuilding through pain and discipline, could not close the final gap. Then, a miracle appeared. That miracle came through Taejin Park, Mubong's abandoned daughter. Unlike her father, she saw the truth in Mori's struggle, a warrior who had lost everything, yet still fought for others. She reached out and gave him her power. In that moment, the faith, sacrifice, and hope of everyone who believed in Mori became one. What emerged was not Mori Dan regaining strength, nor Jin Mori returning to glory. It was Miracle Mori, the awakening of the god of prophecy. The transformation changed him completely. Gone was the smaller frame of Mori Dan. In its place stood a taller, stronger warrior with long golden hair rising like divine fire. Where Mori Dan looked humble and ordinary, Miracle Mori looked like destiny made flesh. Yet in his eyes there was no rage, only calm focus. Miracle Mori united every side of his journey: the raw might of Jaecheondaeseong, the heart of Jin Mori, and the mastery of Mori Dan. He was not just stronger, he was complete. The difference was immediate. The same Mubong who had dominated gods and heroes alike was now being pushed back. Mori could finally clash with him as an equal. His attacks reached cosmic levels, his speed was beyond perception, and his technique territory allowed instant counters from any angle. But what made Miracle Mori terrifying was not just strength, it was discipline. Every movement was efficient, every strike had purpose. He carried god-tier power with perfected martial arts precision. That is why Miracle Mori feels so earned. He gained this power only after losing nearly everything, rebuilding from nothing, and refusing to surrender. Miracle Mori was prophecy fulfilled, the warrior reborn through hope, and Mori's strongest form before transcendence itself.
Mori Hui. Mori Hui is one of the most emotional characters in the God of Highschool. What began as a temporary clone created to replace Jin Mori
became the story of someone who refused to remain a copy. Hui was created during the Sage Realm conflict and sent to the human realm while the real Mori stayed behind to fight. His mission was simple: protect Mori's friends until the original returned. But over time, Hui became far more than a substitute. Hui looked almost identical to Jin Mori, but felt completely different. Where Jin Mori carried playful confidence and carefree energy, Hui's expressions were calmer, more thoughtful, and often burdened. Jin Mori looked born for battle. Hui looked like someone trying to live up to a name too heavy for him. Unlike the original, Hui had limits. His body was unstable, his power was lower, and his life itself was temporary. Because of that, he could not rely on raw talent. He had to become smarter, sharper, and more efficient. Hui had to earn every bit of strength he gained. Training with Siohan Riang changed everything. Hui developed his own style centered around staff fighting. While Jin Mori used Yewei through overwhelming power, Hui used technique, spins, feints, counters, thrusts, sweeps, and precise combinations. He blended staff combat with taekwondo kicks, becoming one of the most technical fighters in the series. As time passed, Hui formed real bonds with Han Dewei, Yu Mira, and the others. He was no longer pretending to be Jin Mori. He was protecting them as himself. For the first time, Hui gained something no clone was meant to have: identity. Hui always knew his time could be short, yet instead of mourning what he was not, he focused on becoming the best version of what he was. That mindset turned him from a clone into a hero. During the final battle against Mubong, Hui returned as a dragon, proving he had fully transcended the role he was born into. Jin Mori was born a legend. Mori Hui had to earn everything. He may have started as a copy, but by the end, he became truly real.
Mori Jung.
Mori Jung is one of the most overlooked versions of Mori in the God of Highschool. He was not the original Monkey King, nor another true Mori. Jung was an artificial human created through cloning research tied to Mori Hui's genetic data, essentially a later generation imitation born from science rather than destiny. His story takes place after Ragnarok, during the era of Park Mubong's rule. By then, Jin Mori's name had become legend and fear. Experiments were conducted to recreate Mori-level power, and Mori Jung was one of the results. But while the process copied traits, it could not copy the soul behind them. Jung inherited enhanced strength, speed, reflexes, and battle instincts, but not Jin Mori's divine essence or limitless growth. He was powerful, but incomplete. Visually, Mori Jung felt different from the others. Where Jin Mori carried playful confidence, Jung had a colder, sharper aura. His eyes were harsher, his presence more tense, and he looked like someone shaped by pressure. That pressure defined him. Jin Mori fought for challenge. Mori Hui fought for identity. Mori Jung fought for acknowledgement. Constantly compared to legends, he was expected to prove his worth, or be dismissed. In combat, Jung was still dangerous. He used a harsher style built on aggression and relentless pressure. While Jin Mori fought like a genius enjoying battle, Jung fought like someone desperate to be seen. What makes Jung tragic is what he lacked. No Jin Tae-jin, no Dewei or Mira, no peaceful chance to find himself. He was born through experimentation and judged before he chose his own path. That is what makes Mori Jung memorable. Jin Mori inherited destiny. Mori Hui earned identity. Mori Jung inherited expectation. Born from copied greatness, yet still fighting to become something original. Subject M. His name was Michael, better known as Subject M. His story began on July 20th, 1969. When Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, humanity discovered something impossible: the dead body of Buddha, with the remains of Jaecheondaeseong's staff, Yewei, lodged within its head. Samples were secretly brought back to the United States for study. Scientists could barely explain what they found through normal science, reaching only one terrifying conclusion: God was real. And if godly beings were real, then perhaps they could be replicated. That belief gave birth to Project God, a classified American program created to reproduce divine power and build an army of gods. The project consumed over 80% of the U.S. national defense and space development budget, costing nearly $1 trillion. Yet despite decades of funding and research, it produced nothing. Eventually, the program recruited two adoptive brothers, Michael and Dr. Doogie. Michael was suffering from a terminal illness with little time left to live. To prolong his life, he volunteered to become a test subject for Project God. His younger brother, Dr. Doogie, was a brilliant bioengineer who dedicated himself to the project, not for money or military success, but to save the brother who had always protected him. The experiment succeeded, but at a terrible cost. Michael gained monstrous strength and became Subject M, a weaponized human infused with unstable, godlike power. He later appeared during the National God of Highschool tournament, representing America as one of its strongest fighters. His body had become overwhelming, but the power inside him was incomplete and uncontrollable. Eventually, Michael lost control. The very force meant to save his life began destroying him from within. He rampaged until he was stopped by Mori Hui and the others. In the end, Michael did not fall because he was weak. He fell because the experiment itself was a failure. His body could not contain what humanity tried to steal. Michael's death marked the cruel truth behind Project God. Money, ambition, and science could imitate power, but they could not recreate divinity without consequence. That is why Michael remains one of the saddest characters in the God of Highschool. He was not born a monster. He was a brother, a patient, and a man desperate to live. But in mankind's attempt to create a god, they destroyed the human inside him.
When Mori Dan became the god of prophecy, he gained one of the most broken abilities in the entire series. He could summon other versions of Jaecheondaeseong from alternate dimensions. Not alternate Jin Moris, but alternate great sages equal to heaven. Each one came from a different world with their own story, personality, and path. But no matter how different they were, they all shared one thing in common: a deep hatred for Tathagata. Every one of them could use cloning through their fur, chebongchim, and wield their own version of Yewi. Mori wasn't summoning copies of himself. He was summoning entire realities of Monkey Kings. Red-haired Jaecheondaeseong, or female Mori. This version could use her Yewi to generate and project flames, most likely drawing power from the 91st Dragon King flame, powerful enough to fuel an entire nebula cloud thunderstrike from the entire solar system, alongside Mori Jin and Hui. Her red hair is also very similar to Taejin Park when she enters her Jaecheondaeseong state, suggesting the two may share a similar appearance in their normal forms. Energy Jaecheondaeseong, or Fat Mori. This version had the ability to unleash massive amounts of energy. However, doing so required an enormous amount of metabolism, which is why he was constantly seen eating. After using especially taxing techniques, his larger body would slim down dramatically. Gate Jaecheondaeseong, or Buddha Mori. This version could summon gates that led to any location the user desired. He could even open portals to other dimensions, and these gates were also capable of pulling targets inside. On top of that, he could locate beings as small and numerous as the fairy colony. Mage Jaecheondaeseong. This version of the great sage had the ability to control time and vibrations. His facial features closely resembled Han Dewi. In his world, everything was destroyed by Tathagata's sixth weapon, the fairy colony. Shadow Jaecheondaeseong. This version could manipulate shadows through the shape of his clothing. However, the larger the shadow became, the weaker its durability was. In his world, Mubong was a loser, constantly bullied by others. His shadow-based powers appear very similar to those of Sabuti. Analyzer Jaecheondaeseong, or Giant Mori. This version could analyze opponents to an incredible degree, allowing him to figure out the movement patterns of Tathagata's sixth weapon and its leaders. He also appeared capable of creating shields in the new world. In the end, he sacrificed himself for Mori in order to save his own world. Infinity Immortal Jaecheondaeseong. This version of the great sage possessed an immortal body with infinite regeneration, making him the perfect tank and one of the hardest versions to put down.
Nirvana Mori. After Miracle Mori came the final evolution, Nirvana Mori. This was not just another transformation, it was the end of Mori's entire journey. After endless wars, betrayals, loss, and sacrifice, Mori transcended battle, hatred, and even godhood itself. By receiving the power of humans, gods, demons, and Generation X, every force converged into Mori. The loop of binding turned red, and what emerged was no longer simply the Monkey King, Jin Mori, or the god of prophecy. Mori had become a being beyond titles. His appearance reflected that transcendence: 3 pairs of crimson wings, a divine aura, and complete calm. He no longer looked like someone chasing power. He looked like power itself. Nirvana. A state beyond gods, where space, time, and existence itself become tools. Entire realities can be shaped with a single action, and at this level, Mori doesn't just surpass gods, he transcends them. In this state, Mori's feats surpassed every form before him. He restored damage done to the universe, repaired destruction across the solar system, and reversed devastation on a cosmic scale. He stripped Park Mubong, a being who had stolen the authority of the supreme god, of all his power and reduced him to nothing. He could create life, purify corruption, and manipulate reality itself. Earlier forms could destroy planets, defeat gods, or shake galaxies. Nirvana Mori went beyond destruction. He could restore what was broken, erase divine authority, and control the laws governing existence. He was no longer limited to winning battles. He could rewrite the aftermath of them. Jin Mori isn't powerful because of strength. He is powerful because he never stops evolving. Earlier Moris fought through instinct, rage, pride, or determination. Nirvana Mori fought with total understanding. No wasted motion, no anger, no need to prove anything. If previous forms were warriors climbing upward, Nirvana Mori stood at the summit itself. Jaecheondaeseong was raw power. Jin Mori was heart. Mori Dan was discipline. Miracle Mori was hope. But Nirvana Mori was enlightenment made flesh, a being whose limits simply do not exist.